First of all, your background looks a little bit cooler than mine, but I'm gonna hang with you here. So no, we got Bert Sorin, the president of Sorinex, which put on one of the coolest events I've ever been to at Winter Strong. And I just got done talking to Donnie, so he said hello. I told him I would tell him he said
Donnie's
hello
awesome.
for you. Yeah, he is the man. So Bert, first and foremost, man, I appreciate you jumping on with us today and finding some
Of
time
course.
in the crazy times. I know you guys are doing some cool things with the racks and some of the stuff you guys are doing for Sorinex, and we can talk a little bit about that as well. But
Sure.
but first and foremost, man, I want, before we create some substance to it, I know we'll talk a little bit about your career in the track and field and the way you're lifting, the way you guys go about Sorinex Outdoors, which I really want to dive into because at Mindstrong we love the outdoors as well.
Yeah.
But can you give a little bit of a background for people who are listening to what your life looks like, kind of what you guys do across all fields? Because I know you're not just the athletic or the college realm. I know you guys go outside of that, and we have Sorinex racks inside of Mass Performance up here in Minneapolis, which Brian Peters essentially brought to us as well. And that was when I kind of dove down the realm of Sorinex equipment and some of those things. But you guys have an amazing thing going. But for people who are listening, can you sort of give us a breakdown of what that looks?
Yeah, sure thing. First of all, I appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah.
It was fun to get to meet you and learn more about you and your guys' movement at Winter Strong.
Yeah.
I've been following from afar, so it's really cool. So I appreciate it. Yeah, Bert Sorin, president and co-owner of Sorinex Exercise Equipment. We've been around since 1980, family-owned business, just my father and I.
Mm-hmm.
And Dad is still around. He's turning 70 here soon and just an absolute animal in his own right.
Yeah.
And so Pops is good to go. Yeah, he started it a long time ago when there just wasn't really any custom weightlifting equipment out there. He's a big, strong guy, athlete, and has a mechanical background, and just basically said the stuff that was in the market at the time wasn't good enough, strong enough, adjustable enough, or safe enough, and he knew how to build stuff. So he said, well, I'll go try to build it myself. So it was I've said it before, it's certainly the American dream and part of ingenuity when you could just decide to chase your dream. And, in 1980, it was obviously before, the internet popularity and social media and everything like that. So for him to have that dream just to go after it and literally in our carport to start building it right there on the floor in the carport without an idea of it becoming a multi-million-dollar business, the idea that he thought he could just make some equipment, and much like an artist, he had that design in his mind of some ways to solve some training problems, and he just had to get them out. So that's what we've been built upon. I started working there in probably 1992 part-time, so I was like 15 years old. So I would do installs and work in the shop and things like that, and we didn't have powder coat at that time. We were wet painting, so it would be the paint section or prefab or whatever it may be. And so then, went to college, was a collegiate athlete at University of South Carolina, and after I graduated there, I continued on with a professional track and field career as a hammer thrower. And while I was doing that and training for the Olympic trials of 2000, 2004, I was full-time at Sorinex. So I've been here for 21 years, same job, and kind of went from dad's helper into kind of more of a leadership role. So that's kind of my daily and a little bit of what we do. So what we do at Sorinex, we create innovative training solutions for the world of strength. That's what we've always been about, the human performance world, really more than the strength world. And so that could be sports, that could be elite military operations. It could be the home use guy that's just trying to stay strong. But the idea is we want to make sure we have innovative training solutions for people who want more. And so we've been kind of calling the go-to guys for the go-to guys. And so that's what we do.
It's awesome too. And for, to paint a picture of my experience with you guys and kind of how that looks, it is really cool. The art of it and the technique of it and the passion behind it. Obviously, like I've already alluded towards the outdoor side of it. And you guys hit it from so many spectrums, but I want to peel back into that initial, jump start from Pops in the terms of he just wanted to fill a need. right? So you didn't
Yes.
essentially get to now where you kind of expand out to all these areas. The initial need, what is that of the family culture? What is that if you look at your guys' family as an internal circle, what is that? Obviously sustained that over the last couple decades now.
Sure.
What is that? What peels into people to think of things like that and then kind of pass it down towards the family?
It really boils down to two things,
Yeah.
or I'd say three. It starts with passion.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to solve the problem if you're not in the problem, right? Like, if I was in the computer world, I'd be horrible because I don't know anything about it. Or if I couldn't solve a computer problem, I'm not in computers enough to even know what the problems may be.
Sure.
I'll leave that to the experts.
Sure.
So you have to have the passion to be within the realm that the bullets are flying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're there, you go, oh, this would be better if this was bolted differently or this adjusted differently. Or so that has to start from there. Drives innovation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like they say, what's it? Innovation mother necessity is the mother of invention, right? So there has to be the necessity. That's the passion. The mother of invention being that innovation side, and then the last part of it has to be intentionality, being intentional. So you can't just change something just for the heck of changing it. There has to be an intentional desired result that's based upon what you're trying to change. So those three things have been honed over the years, but really whether it's 40 years ago or right now, those three have always been there.
That's
and
awesome.
So when people ask, like, we're into the outdoors world or the strength world, of course, it's only because those have been our passions.
Right.
And so I've invented, and my dad's invented, a lot of things that have worked within the outdoors or hunting world, only because that's what we're doing on our free time. And it's wet, it's cold, it's all this other things out there. And so if you're a little bit, have some ingenuity, and you realize, you hear a lot of people say, just embrace the suck. Well, I'd prefer not to. I'd prefer to endure the suck if I have to. But my job as a human with a working brain that could solve problems is to change the suck.
Yeah.
And that's always just been kind of massaging to the brain for both Pops and I, and a lot of the folks in our world, is how do you solve that problem? And that becomes the art form in itself.
I love that, man, because it's make good art, right? And even in this suck, or when you're in a position of your own passion or your own experience, to just make good art, and keep learning from the outside world to sort of help you identify that through either criticisms or feedbacks or questions or anything like that. You can sort of identify your own art. But, you touched on a word there that's really intriguing to me, and I'm more selfishly asking this because I've thought a lot about passion and teaching passion and how people understand passion. And I've never really understood how you could get to the root of that and then share that with people outside of telling them to just go out and experience, right? And so in that suck, when I get the suck or I experience the suck, I want to make it a little bit better. And you're touching on things that believe to you and your family: hunting, being outdoors, and strength and conditioning, obviously a college background, which I'm sure we'll get into as well. But have you found your most success of sustaining and enhancing passion through almost selfishly experiencing things on your own? Do you think that kind of... Yeah, do you think that comes... How people can do that is that route?
Yeah, you have to love it. And I'll endure a lot of pain, a lot of time, a lot of effort, need, requirements, sacrifice. I'll endure a lot of that to chase my passions. Yeah. I think I made a post a year or two ago. I was in Arizona archery hunting mule deer. And I think the picture was just my knees with mud all over my knees. And, true love is flying thousands of miles, driving hundreds of miles just to crawl the last quarter mile on your knees. And I literally did that. I went across the country, drove through Nowheresville just to get the opportunity to sneak for a quarter mile on my knees and my belly to get within archery distance of a public land mule deer. And people go, well, that's a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of money. I'm right. Yeah. But I would want to be nowhere else in the world but that place. And guess what? I didn't send an arrow. The wind changed, the deer ran off, and it was still an awesome hunt, but
Yeah.
I'm so passionate about that experience,
Yeah.
but what happened from that, that experience was you go right back to the drawing board. Then that's how do we innovate, whether it be from a hardware standpoint, a tool, an item, or from what I'll consider a software or application standpoint of how can my technique could have been better?
Sure.
How can I've done things for a different intentional
Sure.
response or result? And I think as long as we chase things like that all the time, you could continue to drive it forward. And at no time did I ever say anything about making money on this.
Right.
And that's what people have to understand. You could be very successful chasing money, but it's a hollow victory that doesn't really have a longevity to it.
Sure.
If you chase excellence and you chase that passion, money, fame, or whatever, like that stuff will eventually come. And if it doesn't, you won the first time already because you're chasing the passion.
Yeah.
So for us, that's what it's always been. And a part of it's been being self-sustainable, being relevant, being good enough. And I've talked about a lot of times, that's a question that many men have. Am I good enough?
Right.
And that's, I think, part of strength training. Am I strong enough or good enough to pick up that bar?
Sure.
Whether it's archery, am I good enough at my craft to send an arrow X number distance of yards and hit what I'm looking at? So that self-testing, I'm addicted to. I am, and I learned that from my dad, and a lot of people are. I'm not unique in that regard.
Right.
But I believe that's the driver that drives that passion, and to always want to be better. If I shot at 50 yards yesterday, I want to shoot at 51 tomorrow.
Yeah.
I want to. That was the addictive part of throwing, of lifting, of all of those things. That my only concern is, do I live long enough and do my body hold up enough to do all the things I want to do?
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of looking at it, which I highly agree with and align with. Now, a question that I'm very even deeperly curious about is you touched on the fame, the money, in that concept. Now, you've competed at an Olympic level. Obviously, your guys' brand and everything is amazing. But now, let me ask you from the fast forward of that, and you do start to get some of that higher platform, that higher status. What's the new identification with addiction or obsession in a positive way, where you still stick with the morals? Because you seem to do a really inspiring way of that. I would say that was probably one of my favorite takeaways from the weekend when I first met you and the crew, was that I really appreciated how we slept in tents. I just appreciated how we just were being humans,
Right.
And there was also high level humans there, and high level conversations and extreme competitiveness and learning, which I'll carry with forever. I think I've had that opportunity to do things like that in my life. I really look forward to that. But I'm still curious about the question I just asked, is how do you maintain that, and how do you sort of see through things as you progress in life, or you get amplified in your platforms?
That's a really good question. Quite possibly, I would say a couple answers.
Yeah.
That would come to mind. That it was hard for so long. I'm trained for it to be hard.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
It does.
It took so long to have success. Let's just say if Sorinex was a different story, how we came on the market with the exact right product, the exact right time, and we were millionaires overnight, I'm sure I would hate to say I'd probably be a different person in some regards.
Right.
But when you've done all the crappy stuff for so long and struggled for so long, thankfully, I believe my mindset is still of a blue collar work mindset. It's going to be heavy. It's going to suck. And I enjoy that.
Yeah.
It's nice having a little bit more money, and it's nice I just see the money as opportunities to get into more interesting, stressful situations. It's a ticket to, whereas let's say for hunting, I was only able to hunt, South Carolina whitetails on public land as a kid because I didn't have anything. Well, then I was able to purchase a little bit of land and hunt them on my own land.
Right.
And now with a little bit more money or connections or social status or whatever,
Yep.
I'm able to go to Arizona or Alberta or something. And the stressor is actually more acute and more it's a higher stressor physically.
Sure.
The money has just allowed me, or success has just allowed me to do it more often.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of the thing. And so I don't want a soft life. I don't want plush. Yeah, it's nice to be able to buy a new bed now if I wanted to.
Right.
But
Right.
I also like wearing t-shirts and the same pants. I don't like giving up on a garment,
I love it, man. Something that's always intrigued me, and you were in this world. I didn't know. I've always thought, I got into sports psychology years ago, and one of the things that was an interesting topic to study was Olympians, and because of the opportunity that you had the way I internalized it was, how do you train for something for maybe 10 seconds of glory, or how do you train for years and like, what is that thought process like? Something I still can't comprehend. I still try to peel into it, but coming from my background of baseball, and we played every night. There were nights where I pitched and did good or bad and was going to pitch the next night, and even at a football level, I've even been curious of people like Brian, and I've asked him these questions. Now, your level and that Olympic status is even deeper, even longer, and I wonder if that plays a role into what you're saying about embracing the suck for so long, for that faith and that belief. But to narrow it into your personal career as an athlete and to everything you're saying, what is that environment like? What is the ability to embrace the suck or stressful adaptations with such a long window?
A long gestation period.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear. I don't want to misrepresent. I was a professional level track and field athlete, i.e. I went places, national, it paid, whatever. I participated in 2 Olympic trials. I was not Olympian. I didn't make an Olympic team. So I don't want to misrepresent that, nor I want to respect those that actually were able to get to that level. I was very close.
Right.
And I feel like I did a good job for a guy that didn't really have a coach at that time, also holding down a job.
Yeah.
But guess what? They don't give me extra points for that, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
So anyway, let's clear that up. But no, it's weird. I thought about it the other day, and the majority of things that I would say good at, or I want to say extraordinary, but better than average at, are generally things that take a long time. And I think that's maybe a skill set that I have, maybe mentally, not necessarily physically, that I'm okay with something taking a really long time. I don't expect success early. Hammer throw is the most technical event in track and field. You'd spin around left, if you're a right-hander, and right if you're a left-hander, and it's pretty much day in, day out, and you're going to suck at it for like 5 to 10 years until you're kind of good.
Yeah.
And if you happen to be one of those genetic freaks that could handle the pounding, and you have the genetic wiring, you're very good. And so to come into it when I sucked, but to have the dream of one day being good. I mean, I remember one year I had a far throw in training. It was about 65 meters at the time, which is a little over my PR at the time. And I trained for a year just to feel that physical feeling again.
Yeah.
One throw that took 2 seconds. I felt it. It felt amazing. It was addictive. And I said, I'll do whatever I can to make that happen more.
Yeah.
And then if you really screw up and you do it at a big competition, then you're hooked.
Yeah.
Because then it's totally addictive, right?
Yeah.
And that was what happened. And so what I think part of it, sorry, I had a little alarm go off.
No,
we were going to talk. Part of it is I'm a dreamer. And so I buy into my dreams pretty quickly and easily, and I'll put up with a lot and to get that dream and to get that experience. And I'm somewhat delusional enough to think that it's going to happen. As crazy as it is, like another story. So, I'm a big hunter, whatever, hunted my entire life since I was a little kid. The fantasy was always, go out there, brave the elements, and one day the animal that is larger and more majestic than anything you've ever even seen in a TV show is going to come out. Somehow you're going to make the shot, and it's going to be incredible. It's like, the buzzer beater in Game 6 kind of deal. Like that's the thing. It's the same thing for athletes, whatever.
Right.
Well, I was able to do it in sports, on my last throw of my SEC championship, I broke the SEC record as a walk-on coming in.
That's awesome.
My last throw of my college career, and then a few years, I mean, that was addictive. But what that taught me was, it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the dream is possible. You do it long enough, the fairy tale does come true. The year I turned 40, I was out bow hunting. Whitetail came out, that the largest thing I've ever even seen on a magazine cover. I made a 49-yard shot, and as I walked up to him, I said, the thousands and thousands of hours I've spent in the woods since I was so big that I could barely walk, and all the times that it was cold and rainy and I was tired, and I kept myself pushing forward because I could one day that next 10 minutes of me being out here is going to pay off in some huge thing. And I had that fantasy in my head.
Yeah.
It's one day it's going to happen. I walked up, I went, it happened. And I called my wife. I said, what I've been hunting for my entire life just happened.
Yeah.
And she goes, well, what are you going to do now? And a lot of my friends said, oh, wow, you're ruined now that it's happened. I said, no, unfortunately, I'm screwed because now I know it's possible. And I said, now the fire has just got gas dumped on it because I know the combination to the lock.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to go after it much harder because I know that I could succeed. And that's basically the tale of everything I've ever done. I've always gone after it until I broke the combination, and then it just made me want it more, whether that's been business, athletics, or any type of endeavor. So I would say that's kind of the secret, if there is a secret,
Sure.
to how I view things and what the success is.
Well, and you touched on some strong points there because, one of the biggest pitfalls and one of the main reasons we started Mind Strong, you kind of touched on that in the beginning, but one of the main reasons we started Mind Strong was that dreamer mentality, getting a group of dreamers together. And then when dreams stop, so in this case, the Olympic trial or endeavor stopped, and then you transitioned to business. Now, the cool thing was you sort of had some history in learning another craft while you were doing it. So you were kind of dealing with that too. And then you have hunting, you have business, you have family, you have all these sort of things, but a lot of people struggle with that. I struggled with that tremendously. How do I change dreams of playing Major League Baseball to having another dream, and that's where I'm just curious, how have you seen that over the years to finding new locks to unlock?
Right. Yeah, I think I believe you have to have a couple interests and at times. And so, like, for instance, like in 2004 after the Olympic trials, I retired from track and field. Well, in 2005, I started up Highland Games again, Scottish Highland Games. So it was just one click off of. Yeah. And in 2007, I won the Amateur World Championships and went pro.
Sure.
Because it was, I want to do something fun. And then, of course, I played with it a little while. Yeah. I threw pretty far in some ways. And then there was one conversation. It's usually a conversation or a kick in the nuts that does it for me. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to Casey Cummins. He was the athletic director of a game. And he goes, oh, hey, how you doing? I was like, hey, I'm Bert. He goes, oh, you're Bert. And I was like, oh, yeah, what's up? He goes, you're the one they said would be really good if you took this seriously. I was like, wait, what do you mean by that? And he was like, well, they said, you just kind of halfway train, but your hammer throw background carries you, but you're not strong in all the events. So, sure. But if you were, and it was like, not only you punching me in the gut, you're calling me out, and you're basically, and I saw it as you're calling out my family name. You're attacking me accurately though, as someone who's not trying and putting in the due diligence into this endeavor. So I'm actually being disrespectful to all those other people on the field if I'm not trying as hard as they are. And so that's what I felt. And so within a 3-month period, I was 53rd, I think, in the nation to second in the nation, and then won the world championships that a couple of months later. But it had to focus my aggression to, no, I won't be known as the guy who squandered the gift.
Right.
And then so I had some success there, but all the while the business was growing and doing some things. And then I started realizing, wow, my throwing career actually gave me a really good understanding of how you train, strength training, because that is the sport. Yeah. Thus, that is building my business. And so I was able to kind of roll one thing into another. And then when I got out of the Highland Games when I was injured, and then you have that energy that you want to put into something. So it's like, okay, if I'm not going to spin around and yell and throw things,
I'm gonna put it over here.
I'm going to put it over here, and that this is going to be Katie bar the door. And I actually had a conversation with some of my guys a couple years back, it was 7-8 years ago. And I said, listen, we're all young. We're young enough to, let's really, really make a run at Sorinex and like really change the world the way we think we can. And in 3 years, if we all put in more than we have, and just really dump in all of our efforts and passion, in 3 years, we'll change the strength world how we think we can, or we're going to run the son bitch into the ground in 2 years. But one of the two is going to happen.
I love that.
And then we'll still be young enough to go do something else.
Yeah, figure it out.
Otherwise, why slow trickle it, until we're 50 and we're like, oh crap, we had our chance.
Yeah.
So thankfully it worked, and that was probably 8 years ago, and we've had a pretty good stick since, and so I feel extremely blessed, and it's not anything magic that I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
Well, no. Well, it's really cool. You are a very intriguing intellectual conversationalist that I've had some conversations with you before, and they've always been intellectually. The first one I got to really share with you was at 7 a.m. in a sauna, so that's going to typically be good. In a cold lake at sunrise, you're probably going to have something to talk about.
Yeah.
So that was always intriguing. But something that's really cool for me to hear, and I want to keep peeling in there because it's fun to listen to you speak. But you've used the word dreamer. And that's something where I guess it's a two-part that as I'm listening to you speak and how that can sort of tie into right now. But, one, you notice that it's hard to keep dreaming as you get older, right? And you do handle failures and fears, and people typically aren't supporting dreamers because you're mostly misunderstood, right? So with that, you're kind of caught off as a crazy. So you have, one, is that a family background? Does that come from pops? Is that sort of how you guys have always been? I'll ask a second question that is in my head, but I first want to hang on that dreamer part because I think that is so inspiring to hear from someone who has done that for many years. Where does that come from?
I think kind of what it might come from potentially is, both my dad and I are only children.
Okay.
And so we didn't have anyone around us pissing on the dreams.
Sure.
You spend a lot of time by yourself. So you become self-sufficient, you become self-entertaining, but then also you could dream the craziest things you want. And there's no one to tell you that's a good idea or a bad idea. And you could kind of do the first couple steps of that dream before anyone even knows you're doing it.
Wow.
So, for instance, like whether it be archery or weightlifting or whatever, like these are things I've been doing since I was a little kid.
Right.
I mean, I remember at 10 or 12 years old, taking a fly fishing class. That's what I wanted for my birthday. It was a fly fishing class. And then my dad bought it for me, and then a fly tying class. So I was like learning the art of tying flies, which is usually like old man stuff.
Yeah.
But I would sit in my room for hours when I was a little kid and look at these books and tie these flies and all this kind of stuff. And I just always liked the idea of the art of something that takes a really long time to master, like a samurai type thing, is how do you learn the art of something that would set you apart? And that was just always kind of what I was into. I wasn't into a lot of sports, like team sports at the time, because, again, I was an only child. There was no one to throw the football with me. And so I didn't have that early exposure. So most of the things kind of revolved around what was the scenario that I could set up to test myself.
And as a hammer thrower, I'm a novice in that situation, but is that
perfect?
Is that individual? Like, is that?
100%.
Yeah.
I threw by myself in a field for 5 straight years.
Oh man, that's so.
In a gravel parking lot,
Right.
I would show up. I'd crack off of work at 5 o'clock. I'd be at Key Road by 5:30. I'd throw until it got dark, and then I'd go and lift weights. And so, but that was just business as usual.
Right.
That you're alone in a parking lot for 5 years.
So go ahead.
That just became, and I remember my dad saying that one time, and then when I transferred to Highland Games, I'd work until 5 o'clock. I'd walk to the end of the parking lot where I made a grassy area, and I'd throw Highland Game implements, and I'd come back and train until 9 o'clock at night. I remember my dad going one day, he goes, "It's hot, it's mosquitoes, it's all that stuff out there," and he's like, "You're going out there and throwing by yourself for years." He goes, "I have to hand it to you." And I kind of looked at him like, I didn't even understand why that was strange.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because I'm going, I want to throw far. I don't care what's between me and that,
Yeah.
or if you like it, or if anyone likes it, or if anyone's going to go watch me, or if they're going to cheer for me. I don't care.
Right.
Like that doesn't mean in the least. Now, if you want to come out there, I'll invest in you and teach you how to do it.
Sure.
Because I think it's cool if you share my same passion. But if I had to do it for 20 years by myself, I'm totally fine with that.
So now take that, because that's perfect segue into Sorinex is not now, it's no longer your dad or you. There's a lot of people involved.
Right.
And so now you have that individuality and you have that dream and you have that vision. I love how you just said, if you come out to me, I'll show you, but if not, I'm going to do this. Now, how have you found ways to take that and tie that in as a leader? How have you found a way to put the vision out where other people can sort of see it for themselves and then act as you've acted?
That's been sometimes we do it well. Sometimes it's been hard because being a guy that's okay by being by himself, it's hard because sometimes I just kind of run out front and do my thing.
Right.
And then sometimes my guys are like, hey, what's the plan? I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. Sorry. I'm just kind of used to doing this.
Yeah.
And so but going back to like whether it be hunting or Highland games or whatever, I've gotten a lot of people into those things because I'm also pretty decent at selling an idea. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm super passionate about it, I'm going to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And if I could talk about it and I can make make you feel what I feel, maybe you'll come over and let's do this together. Mm-hmm. And so there's been always that balance. And really, if you look how Sorinex has grown and hasn't been putting a lot of ads out in the paper and asking for employees, it's usually been people that have integrated into our life, that we enjoy the same passions together. And then, so the resume is, I've known you for 10 years, and I know how you act under stress. I know what your hot buttons are. I know where your strengths, where your weaknesses are. And I know you feel the same thing. And that's what we talk about, the Bosco brotherhood. It doesn't have to be,
that's cool.
Employees. It doesn't have to be, people go, well, do I have to buy from you to be in the Bosco brotherhood? I'm like, no, it's like, there's no really wall or any kind of barrier of entry. It's like, you just know if you are, if we're aligned in thought and heart and what we're about, and we care for each other, then that's it, man. Yeah. And then you get enough of those people around you and then start working in concert. And then if one of them happens to need a job and wants to pour into it, then it kind of works. Yeah. And that's how we've grown. I think that's where we're different than most companies. That's why our growth curve hasn't been as steep. But I think that's where the folks who work with us, whether they be our clients or our employees, the loyalty and the mindset and the passion goes all the way to the bone. And that's where, going back to, it's taken a long time to get here. Yeah. But I think our staying power and longevity is something that's pretty unique within the industry because of that.
Well, I wonder if, and you can talk deeper about this, but taking that term loyalty, do you think that loyalty or that ability to allow that into the tribe almost catapults you to be that individual that you are, because on the back end of it, the loyalty and the freedom is there?
Yeah, I would say so. And as long as you're being valuable to those around you is the key, right? To be a leader, it's not like you do what I say. It's if I could be valuable to you and you want to be around whatever I'm doing, then great. Hopefully this is a relationship that's two-sided and that'll continue to be beneficial for both parties, and then everyone has a chance in some ways to lead through their ideas or, I mean, just so happens my last name's Sorin. So from a Sorin part of it, I'm kind of like, the guy, but I give a lot of latitude to the people that work for me because, if they've passed the smell test over the years of like, they're in this, we even talk about like some of our designs. So we look at it, we go, it's just not Sorinexy, or like even people, what do you think about that guy? His resume, is he Sorinexy? Like, let's be really honest. Like, well, and you just kind of know, and it's not like we're this elitist thing. You just kind of know It just is someone culturally fit for what you're trying to accomplish, and it doesn't mean they're bad if they're not. It just means they're not culturally fit currently for that situation. Brandon Lilly, perfect example. When I first met him, not culturally fit. He was at a different place in his life. I was at a different place. We were all different.
Right.
He had some things he needed to change. It wasn't based upon me by any means, but he started making these massive changes in his life and becoming a different person. And because of that, he has become a big part of the Sorinex culture and shaped the Sorinex culture. So kudos to him for changing it and building his life. Like he's amazing.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Like all of it is just about human performance, just like my strong. It's about human performance, and that doesn't necessarily mean throwing something or lifting something. It's about how do you increase your capacity to impact good on the world.
Yeah, no, I'm going to come back to that too, of how you guys have done that, but I want to stay on that subject because I want to keep you in that headspace of, what's really cool to me is it's a family-owned business, and to see the spider webs come out from other people's ideas, has that been a struggle to sort of watch other people add ideas, or what's that been like from a family perspective?
Great.
Yeah.
It's been great. Well, I have brothers and sisters that I never had.
Yeah, that's so cool.
That's the thing. I always wanted brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
It was awesome that I got to play by myself and kind of dream my own dreams.
Yeah.
But what I've always wanted was people to go along with me on those dreams. Strangely enough, I was fine if they didn't.
Sure.
I had this kind of two-sided, like, just like,
oh, you're good.
Yeah. So, surprising, kind of where was it? So I've always chased those dreams, but it always makes me, I see it as a win, and I get excited when I could put my passion and expertise into somebody and for them to take up, like I bought a bunch of bows for my sales staff.
Yeah.
And for those guys on their sorry, getting blown up.
Good.
I bought bows for my sales staff, but then to see them on their lunch break go outside and shoot archery, and guys that hadn't done it before, and they're starting to get addicted to it and enjoying it, and then we get to spend time together sharing my passion with them. And so if I can invest in those around me for things that I believe in that have been medicinal or enjoying, you're kind of able to kind of change your social circle, hopefully for the better. And a lot of guys do that. Guys and girls do that for me too.
Right. Right. Well, so that's a great way, because the one I've been wanting to ask you is, you guys have made your imprint in human performance in my mind. I came to it in the college realm of seeing what it started trickling through in the college world of people using your guys' equipment, changing their culture into your culture. And now in an institutional sense, before I was sort of introduced to Sorinex and to seeing how you guys operate in a very internal level, that's really wild to put into perception, right? So before I really got to meet you and talk to you guys, that's an insane concept to see an institution open up its culture to another culture and then work together. That's kind of how I saw it at first. And that's what made Sorinex look so cool, was how did these guys do this? But I know from the opportunity of meeting and talking to so many people over the years is that there's no shot that was easy. And so to get your, your passions into that type of realm, or to shift the human performance, can you think back to how that was, and the amount of no's, or how you handled the pressure of your dream?
Oh, it's a very good question, and I don't think many people understand it as difficult as it was.
Right.
You look back, just even started with my dad. 1980. Well, let's go back even further. 1968, where he came to the University of South Carolina as an athlete.
Yeah.
When he was a big lifter at the time, Olympic weightlifter. And he came there as a shot and put discus thrower, and he said, "Where's the weight room?" They go, well, we don't lift weights here." And you go, "Why not?" They go, "Well, this is the University of South Carolina." They said, "Well, it'll make you muscle bound." That was the muscle bound days.
Wow.
So as 18 years old, he's having to go, okay, you guys aren't in with my culture as
Right.
an 18-year-old athlete. And he borrowed a car and drove back up to New Jersey and picked up all his weights and brought them back down to South Carolina and allowed all the track team to work out on it. So in a way, he was the first strength coach at South Carolina.
Wow.
And in his grad assistant days, he wrote the programming for strength conditioning training there as well as taught classes. So it's always been there. We've always kind of had to kind of buck that system, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then you fast forward at 1980, he starts a company based on heavy weights and squat stands and all this other stuff. Well, if you're around 1980 was exactly during the Nautilus days.
Mm.
So everything was machine
Yeah.
and all this other stuff. So we were having to buck the trend at that point as well. And there was, you know, it was hard. And then so I come on in 1999, coming as a power and speed and strength athlete. And, you know, part of power lifting was kind of really starting to crack off,
Mm-hmm.
but there still wasn't a lot of explosive lifts, Olympic lifts, things like that. So I kind of came on right as that was first starting. So I'm trying to convince people, hey, we need to be doing plyometrics and weighted throws and all this other stuff.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
you know, I understood how that worked. And then having to go out as literally a dad and, you know, instead of mom and pop, like a son and pop company, and convince these strength coaches, you know, to go with us versus these other monster companies that have been around forever. You know, my secret ingredient was passion, because I was still throwing at the time. So when I would travel, I would ask to train in every weight room that I went in because I needed to train.
Yeah.
And I would win these coaches over because I'd walk in, instead of trying to sell them equipment, I would talk training with them because that was where my mind and my heart was, my passion was. Yeah. And then I'd go over and I was pretty good in the weight room. So I'd do, you know, my weights and everything. They go, oh, this guy, they literally say, you're just going to train right now? And I wasn't the typical salesman and go over and work the biceps so it looked good in a golf shirt.
Right.
You know, I'd go and clean 350 pounds. And they're like, oh, you're like actually training.
Yeah.
No, yeah. And I said, you know, or they go, you want to jump in with our football group later? I'm like, yeah, sure. And you do that for like 10 years. Again, it takes a while, but you build a culture of, oh, these are guys that actually lift. And it wasn't a show. Like I had a meet there that weekend. You know, I would ramp my sales calls around, you know, if I had to go up to UNC, I had a meet there on the Saturday. So I'd go up there a day early, get my pregame lift, meet with the coach. And I'd invite him, hey, I'm throwing tomorrow. You want to come out there and watch? Like, oh, so you're like competing, right? And so I think I was doing it differently than everyone in the industry was at the time because it was real. I was learning how to melt my life together with my business life. And it just so happened that it was, people saw what it was for what it was. And, but it took a long, long time. You know, I remember having to meet with 8 athletic directors and they go, well, we don't really know who you guys are. And, you know, we're looking at X, Y, and Z coming. I said, well, that's great. You know, and you'd have to kind of go through everything. And, you know, thankfully 20 years later, generally ADs know who we are. They had us at their last place. They trust us, but that goes back to be good at anything. It usually just takes a really long time. Like I think Gary Vee and a lot of other people talk about, you know, look at what people are doing. The people that are successful right now, look at what they were doing 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And if it's the same thing, then those people are generally should be where they are at. But surprisingly, look at the people doing crazy stuff right now. And then realize, don't make fun of them too much because they're probably the ones that all eyes are going to be on in 10 years.
Yeah, it's almost like it's cool to hear you say that too, because when you look at yourself out of sports or out of college, you're going to get, if you intentionally go into anything curiously or excited, you're probably going to get good at that craft over the course of time. You know, and
you got to.
Yeah, and so it's sort of picking and aligning with, well, what craft seems worth struggling for? You know, what sort of, what do I want to have? Exactly.
And really, you know, it doesn't, what do they say, you know, niches make riches. I mean, you could be pretty successful off something that is that big of an industry. You know, the human performance industry in 1999 didn't seem like it was a monster coming.
Right.
And I remember my my grandmother asking, well, what are you going to do? What you're going to sell weightlifting equipment to people? Well, and I'm going, well, of course, an 80-year-old woman wouldn't get it.
Yeah.
But, and then she goes, well, what? People ask me, well, what happens when all the colleges get their stuff and they don't have to buy it again? And I
Fair
said,
question.
well, right. And my retort was, well, what happens when all the Americans own a car? They're going to get another one.
Yeah.
They're going to get another couch. They're going to get another TV at some point. There's always upgrading. They go, oh. I said, there's, 600 colleges or whatever too. And I said, we're a two-man operation. We don't need that much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's interesting and kind of going, and even I was able to purchase a new house and some stuff like that. And it was funny when my grandmother came over, and it's not a mansion by any stretch of the imagination. It's just nicer than what I'd had before.
Yeah.
And she looked around. And she's like, "So what is it that you do again?" And it was just so funny because it just showed the generational gap of.
Yeah.
It just sounds so crazy, that I guess I'm weightlifting and. All of a sudden, there's food on the table.
Grandma, they bought a lot of the dumbbells.
They bought a lot of those, Grandma. We're good.
That is super cool, man. Well, so to sort of finalize it, because that is an amazing story. Like I said, you're a very fun guy to listen to speak, and you another thing I think an attribute that you have that I was really fortunate to study and be in front of is you do hold a room very collectively, and that was really cool to see how you formed scheduling and got 100 people or so, and you cornered teams and you made people do things. So you obviously have some skill sets in that world of just programming, communicating, creating some of that confidence from people who are listening to you. You do a phenomenal job of that. Now, what we always try to do with our guest is we always center it or finish it around what we call the Diamond Series, which is basically your home plate is your purpose, your standards, your systems, and your vision. And so to look at that in the moment, obviously a purpose is always evolving, and we've talked a lot about purpose in the conversation, but we always ask ourselves in the sense of how we identify with ourselves, how we serve other people, what we're willing to struggle for. You've already touched on all of those, but to simplify it or narrow it, as Bert Sorin, the president of Sorinex, when you're doing that now, you now know that there's a need, you can fill it, you have strong relationships, people believe in you, you've created a team, a livelihood for a lot of people, and it's a great, above all, it's just really cool. For people like myself, it was just like, Thanks. Well, that's cool. You can do things you want to do, like that's a cool, inspiring story. But for yourself as a person, when you look at it now, and I've already asked you this, what is the moment, purpose, or why that gets you to sustain what's happening and sustain being a good family man and a businessman, and you're still extremely, I'll pump your tires for you, physically put together, so what's the initial purpose now that gets you moving?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I would say it kind of goes back to, I've said before, I'm addicted to having extraordinary experiences with extraordinary people.
That's awesome.
And the economy of that is to be accepted and to have an interaction with extraordinary people, you have to step up your own game. And folks like yourself and Brian and the handpicked group that was at Winterstrong, I all considered extraordinary people. So if I want to learn from them and experiences with them, then I have to offer them something. And that doesn't mean money. That doesn't mean food. It has to mean my existence in their life makes their life better. So I have to bring value. And so if I'm always developing myself, I could bring value to those around me and those that I respect. Thus, I feel like I could always be in the black in the relationship, that I'm bringing something effective to the table that we could then go and create extraordinary experiences together. And that's the driver for me. And that doesn't mean only a famous person, or it means my wife is an extraordinary person. I want to build extraordinary experiences with her. That's why I married her. But I have to make sure I'm doing my job to make her want to be around me every chance she gets, or my kids to want to run into my arms and to be able to lift weights with me or go do other things. Like I have to always, I feel, have that value proposition to the world around me. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. That's how I've done it.
Yeah.
But that's what I know I want. I want to see smiles. I want to see other people's life get better. And that's what I consider the extraordinary experience. And if I could do my homework in the back end so I could bring that to their life, then it's a good exchange, and I think everyone goes down the road together.
Extraordinary experience. I absolutely love that. I'm going to take that in my back pocket with me. That's a great breakdown, and I can see what you're saying. And when you think of that person, the person that's staying on yourself, there's obviously some standards you have in place and some values that you have to objectively make sure you're checking so that you're giving that opportunity for people around you and the opportunity to go out and learn. So when you think about, your mental, physical, emotional standards as a human, you've got a lot of stuff going on. How do you build, what's your objective needs that you have to get done? Like, what do you have to do for yourself to be able to do that for the world? To be a good husband, to be a good leader. What do you have to check off mentally and emotionally and physically that puts you in a good state of flow?
I have to be in the pursuit of something.
Mm-hmm.
I have to struggle. I have to strain a little bit. I have to have quiet time. I have to re-gear myself. If I'm always in grind mode, and I've talked about this before, I think grinding is an intermediate skill.
Mm-hmm.
The people that the top, or you always talk about like the king retired to his chamber, or the judge retired to his chamber. They're doing it to think. So I have to have time to think and slow things down. But I also have to have time to put my shoulder into something and to struggle and strain a little bit, because it re-centers me.
Yeah.
And then I hate to say it, I'm addicted to seeing people smile. I like when people are happy, and I love it if I could be the one that helps them a little bit with that.
That's amazing, man. That's really cool. I mean, to round it out here and take you home to the vision part of it, I know you guys are doing some amazing things right now with COVID and giving back, and you're in a great platform to do that, and there's a lot of people that are following suit, which is amazing. Can you sort of touch on that a little bit, of what Sorinex is doing, or what you guys are, how people can help in that sense, and then also,
Sure.
where Sorinex is going outside of COVID too? What's the carrot out in front of Bert that keeps you moving forward?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we started the off-grid rack last week,
mm-hmm.
and that's basically, it was an expeditiously designed rack to get in the industry really quickly, so people could get something inexpensive and fast they could train at their house.
Yeah.
That's the only reason. We weren't working on it before. We weren't trying to, make a giant profit. In fact, we're giving all the profits away for the first couple weeks of it to the COVID research and fighting COVID. We want people to be able to train and hopefully flatten this thing out and shorten this, as fast as possible.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing for the off-grid rack. And, the kind of the carrot for me is just make more impact,
mm-hmm.
make more impact on the world. If we could, when we cease to make a positive impact, then probably just pack up my toys and go home. It's we kind of lost it, if that's the point. So the goal is always to just make a positive impact, and I like going after bigger and bigger fish, per se, more and more extraordinary people, because they have the touch points to more people. So if we could influence them positively,
Sure.
and that helps them to influence others, then our reach is even more effective.
Yeah,
so.
That's a great breakdown of it, and it's a great breakdown. You look at, it's the same thing with Brian. Brian Peters, I'll give him a little bit of a plug, because he's doing a phenomenal job, and without him, this wouldn't really be possible. So that's part of the touch point, right? And I got to
Brian's amazing guy.
He's the man.
Really, really enjoyed getting to know him more over the last couple of years.
Unbelievable guy, and I think about what he's doing right now he's put forth a lot of stuff to help out with COVID, and what he did with the XFL sort of took that, switched it, and he's moving forward as well, and helping with some charities, and he's always been like that, and I think back to him.
He was a big inspiration of what we did with the off-grid rack.
Oh, he'll love to know that. He's a great guy. He's extraordinary in his own right, and what you just said, him and I have talked a lot about raising your impact in your platform.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you the opportunity to touch more people, and so
Yes.
your platform serves as a teacher to who you are as an individual. It's almost like we talk a lot about going to war internally, more so than anything else, to fix your own leaks, to improve yourself, to
Yep.
get experiences, and then get yourself to bigger platforms, so you do have the opportunity to do that. And Sorinex you guys are an amazing leader in the field of human performance. So for someone like myself to spend time with you and get to listen to you is amazing. And to kind of, I know we'll kind of end here, but from myself and Brian and the rest of Mindstrong Bert, it's an honor to have your time, man. That's a huge form of leadership. And for you to give that to us, not only myself, I mean, selfishly, I'm very jacked up, but to pass the torch of what you do, and what you just said was a lot of golden nuggets. I'm really excited to share this podcast, and then also from the entire Mindstrong team, man. Thank you for opening up your arms and sharing some meals and some time and conversation with us. That's
Oh
really
man,
cool.
you're very, very welcome, and I'm absolutely honored to get to be on the show, and I love what you guys are doing. So please keep it up, and we're definitely feeding one another. So thank you.
Thank you, brother. Hey, enjoy the rest of
Yeah,
your
man.
day, and I will talk to you
You
soon.
too.
All right, man. Take
See you,
care.
bud.